From Anshe Sfard Beth El Emeth Congregation, it's time to take 10 Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein.
Welcome to our discussion of Parashat Tissa, Fumigation. If we think about Parashat Tissa, the beginning of it, there are 6 different sections, and they don't seem connected. And you wonder, what are they doing here? You have to give a half shekel. We already talked about that in Parashat Truma. You have to wash your hands. There's a laver. If you need a laver, it's part of the furniture of the Beit HaMikdash. It belongs in Parashat Truma. That's where the furniture, the Aron, the Shulchan, the Menorah, put the laver over there. Then it says that you should make special anointing oil. Anointing oil, we already had in Parashat Tissa last week, the anointing ceremony. Why do we have an anointing ceremony here? Here it says that you not simply anoint all the different figures, the Kohen Gadol, but you also have to anoint the vessels themselves. Then we have the spices that are made for the altar, the golden altar, the incense altar. Speaking of which, if you look in last week's parsha, right before this week's parsha, there was also the golden altar. What's it doing there? You had the Aron, the Shulchan, the Menorah, 3 major pieces of furniture of the Beit HaMikdash. They were described in Truma. Why is the golden altar a major piece of the Heichal, of the inner sanctuary of the temple? Why does it not mention that in Parashat Truma? Why is it here at the end of Tissa, adjacent to the beginning of Parashat Tissa? Over the years, I've been struggling with this question, looking at all kinds of different commentators. We've talked about it in the past. Is it simply a miscellaneous, things that don't belong elsewhere, the details, we don't need them elsewhere? Is it to show the Kedusha? Look at the great holiness with which the Jews were engaged, and then they did the golden calf. It's an interesting introduction to the golden calf. We're talking about the holy half shekel, the holy incense, the holy anointing oil, the holy architects, and the holy Shabbat, and then the golden calf. In the middle of the holiness. It's a way of saying the Jews sinned in the midst of holiness. One could argue that everything here is sort of auxiliary. These are auxiliary things to the actual service itself. But today, I'd like to talk about fumigation. If you're just going to set up a sanctuary, and no one is in any particular need of delousing or disinfection, then it would be sufficient to have an altar, sacrifices, a menorah to represent Torah and light and God's presence, a shulchan to represent God's kindness, represent the 12 tribes, represent the bread we present to God, and the ark, centerpiece of it all, to represent the Torah. That would be sufficient. Now that we have the golden calf, we need defumigation. We need disinfection. We need purification. And all of this is about that. As the Sforno points out, in order to bring the divine presence, you don't need a golden altar with incense. We have everything we need. We have the big altar for sacrifices. We have the Aron, the Menorah, the Shulchan. It's good enough. What is this for? So he has his own theory. But I want to suggest that the purpose of the Torah, the incense we bring, is defumigation. After all, when we have the Yom Kippurim, which is alluded to here for the first time, where Yom Kippur, you have the incense cloud that's made out of the incense. Why? Because in order to purify us from the sins of Yom Kippur, related to the golden calf. Because the high priest can't wear gold on Yom Kippur because he's atoning for the golden calf. There's an element of the egel and the sacrifices. Because we are so sinful, we have to have a fumigation. Before you come in, you have to use the incense. It's a fumigation. The half shekel, for atonement, we have to atone the sin of the golden calf, giving all that gold to the egel, to the golden calf, instead of to the sanctuary. The kior, it's obvious. Now that we've explained it, it's clear. Why do you need the laver here? Because if we had pure hands, we wouldn't need a laver. Since our hands are not so pure, our hands made the egel, the golden calf. Therefore, we need the kior, the laver, in order to purify ourselves. As we enter the sanctuary, we're not worthy of entering that sanctuary without it. And I don't understand. I thought we were talking about the anointing of the high priest in last week's parsha. All of a sudden, he tells us how to make the oil, and you have to anoint the vessels as well. The answer is fumigation, purification. In Parashat Tissa, we spoke about the dedication ceremony, the 7 days dedication ceremony. That was for sanctification of the holy people and vessels. Now we're talking about defumigation, and that's different. And finally, the ketores, the incense, is made because you have to clear things up. Some say that that's why we say the Pita Maktoris in Nusach Sfard here, Andre Sfard. We say the Pita Maktoris, Blinetta, we try to say it every day. Why? Because before you go off to work, you have to defumigate. You have to get ready for the fumes of the tainted world outside. And therefore, you need the fumigation. Before we continue, we need that kind of fumigation. So that's the theory. We need all these things. Because of the golden calf, we need these things as well. When David was about to enter the sanctuary, well, he couldn't build the temple because he had blood on his hands. But his son Solomon tried to build the temple. The Gemara tells us that the doors wouldn't open. They couldn't get started. Why? Because they weren't worthy. So to hear the Parsha sort of says, on the one hand, build a temple, sure, go ahead. Build a temple like David and Solomon, build it away. So we have Truma and Tetzaveh, everything's going great, we're building. And now, not just because of the sin of the golden calf, but because of human imperfection, we need some defumigation. We need some desensitization. We need some purification and disinfection. Because in some ways it's impossible. Can you really build a temple for God? After all, the whole world can't contain God. Certainly not a little temple like this. So the impossibility of a temple is the other reason that we have to have these fumigations, because it exemplifies the notion that although we dare to have a temple on the one hand, we dare not. And you better purify yourself first before you can actually make this special sanctuary. Why do we have all these different sections? The beginning of Parashat Tissa, the end of Parashat Tetzaveh. Why do we have these sections? Both because the human condition itself is so imperfect that it's not worthy of having a temple unless we defumigate. And secondly, because particularly in light of the fact that there eventually would be a golden calf, well, certainly people that allowed and tolerated the golden calf or even participated in the golden calf, certainly that people must defumigate, must disinfect, must purify, must sterilize before you can dare to build a house for God. Thank you for joining us here at the Anshe Sfar Beth Lemeth Congregation for our discussion of the Parsha and the holidays. Join us each week for a discussion of the holidays, Parsha, and thanks to Jason Lefkowitz, our producer. Thank you.
This has been 10 Minutes for Torah with Rabbi Joel Finkelstein. To learn more, visit asb.org.